And I'm doing my best to speak to you from presence and not from character, from mind, because I want to show the difference somehow here. This human body started to shake a lot, sometimes very violently. And this was a new experience as an observer of what the human body can do. I hadn't seen this ever in all of the records of my life. And sometimes after this shaking, I would get immense feelings and experiences of these feelings. And last week, in a 1-hour meditation, for 30 minutes I shook violently. Just unbelievable levels of shaking, high energy in this body.
I am the light of love. I am.
Hey beautiful family. Before I start, let me send an abundance of love from myself to whoever you are. I want to say how grateful I am to see all of the love and supportive messages that were sent after the last video that I put on. But I also want to say that this process is over, and I want to explain something very important. I'm speaking to you from a state of consciousness where I'm in presence. I don't really feel any attachment as I sit here to the character, to the events that happened as a mind-based character. I certainly have records of what happened in Tanzania, and no, I'm not losing my mind. Perhaps I have lost my mind. This is important. We all need to lose our mind. But no, I have not gone crazy or anything like this. And let me explain. All of us are restricted and sick and filled with illness because of what having the mind character dominate us does. The fall of man is to live in the mind. Many persons have heard this term. And the fall of man results in the pain and the suffering and the sickness. Now many people come to an awakened state in different ways. I have Christian friends who are truly Christian. They are surrendered. They've surrendered their worldly character and they are simply present in service. Their body, their brain cells are not overrun with a character, not overrun with strategies and opinions and fears and plans. They are simply present, a vessel of God's love and spirit. And because of that, their brain is loose and free. And the unconditional love of God that's found in presence can make use of their brain to be a vessel. That's goal is merely to bring God's love into this world. Not as a character, but as a vessel. As a voice of the occurrence of nature without separation. As a channel without any prejudice and any condition on the love coming through. And this is a space in consciousness I know. I've been there. And I fell away from there. And in falling away from there, I have gained great insight. Great and blessed insight. When this human who sometimes grabs with the mind at the identity and used to hang on to an identity as John an Englishman. When God called this human body to be of service, this human body went in innocence, with its hands behind its back, in a forest full of mist, with its eyes closed, trusting that magnetic pull of spirit, trusting that it wouldn't bump into a tree because spirit had control. Now when mind comes in, the hands come out and the eyes open, and you try to control that. But the reality is that life is a mist. You will never understand the mystery that you're in, and when we surrender, you will see it. Now I don't want you to just listen to this human talking to you and accept what I say. I want you to look at it with your brain, not with your mind, because your mind is conditioned. It has prejudice on everything, belief, opinion. But to try and look at it fresh, without any belief, without any hang-up, without any opinion, just with your brain, investigating. Because I'm under the feeling that when we do that, we all reach the same place. It's not that I am an individual with beliefs and opinions. It's that I'm a human who, when you surrender the mind, has access to a higher capacity to use the brain here and now in the present moment to investigate self, other, and the world. And so I would urge you, don't take what I say and just believe it and add it to your character or reject it. But investigate yourself and it and see how it goes with you. So in my last video, I was going through the experience of grief. And I watched as my mind took hold of that and tried to make it about the character. Now for some of you, this is going to be hard to understand. Unless you've come into now consciousness where there's no character, you may struggle. But this is what happened. Many of you have seen a shift in me this year as I've let go and I've entered surrender again. The human I am went innocently in surrender to Spirit's will into Tanzania. To do what we were doing required that I stayed surrendered. But I did not. I formed a character in my mind. And in forming that character, I actually eventually made myself ill. Made this body ill. So I will use that last video as an example. Grief. I am in presence. I am here, free and loose in the moment, no mind, just brain. You still keep records, you still have your intelligence, but that intelligence is governed by that compassion and unconditional love that reverberates through you when the mind is gone. The mind has conditions on everything. When there's no mind, it is the state that Christ mentioned, the unconditional love. In that state, when grief comes, you may weep, you may cry. When sadness comes, you may feel it. When joy comes, you will laugh and smile. That's the freedom, to have the brain in the present moment with all its cells ready for the present moment's expression. To understand itself as a part of nature. But what happens with the mind is we build up characters that are often in opposition to that flow. And so my character developed the problem of pride and arrogance. And so when grief rose in my body and needed to express, the mind took hold of that and said, not now. Not now, nature. This is not the time for that. We must work. Now this is not a state of unconditional love, because this excludes self from love. This is the mind playing the character of being loving to others. This is the self hiding in a character again, but I couldn't see it. And so as the grief would rise up, and the mind blocked it, where, if you don't feel it now, when it needs to be felt, when are you going to feel it? Ask yourself this. If the mind is stopping us, all of us, from feeling what is rising, because it often is, and it's not just grief. It's not societally acceptable to be joyous in many occasions. Even when you meet people who you know just need a hug, but you don't because of societal conditioning, because you think, oh, they might reject that, they might not like it. Even that is an energy stored in your body. You might feel sadness, but you don't feel it. And after a while, many people don't even feel it rising, but it's still getting stored inside the records of this human body and its energy field. And so all of these energies don't come through and express. And if you sit in nature and you see a tree blowing in the wind, it has to move in that wind. Now if the tree gained a carnal mind and said, I reject nature's natural way, I refuse to move in the wind, I become arrogant and prideful, I don't need to move in the wind, nature, what will happen? The branches will snap. We know this. And so, inside us as human beings, we are like the tree in the wind, and our pride and our arrogance and our character. I'm a man, I must be strong, I must not cry. It's one I carried. I must be strong for these children, a false sense of strength, a false sense. And so I must not allow my branches to move in the wind. I must not allow that grief to be expressed. I must not cry in front of these people. We're breaking branches inside us. And so as those branches break inside of us, we store these breaks, we store this broken energy in the body. And if it is not felt now, if I need right now, if this human body needs to cry right now because of an event in front of it, and it does not, when does it? Where does that energy go? So recently coming at you from presence, Spirit led my human body to do a certain type of meditation and practice and surrender. And whilst doing these meditations, Spirit, as you know, has come through to me in new ways, and various new things have happened. This human body has now started to see beings of blue light. Who they are, with names, what, I don't know. Don't know how to label that. It's just an experience and a record I have. Thankfully, many thousands of others have come forward agreeing they have too. This human body has started to speak in a language that it doesn't understand. I've never heard this language coming out of me before, but it's coming out. Many have called it a few things. Some have called it light language. Christians have called it speaking in tongues. I've sang in this language too. But when presence took the body, here now with a brain, not a mind, but a brain here surrendered to the moment, my body, this body, has started to shake. And I'm doing my best to speak to you from presence and not from character, from mind, because I want to show the difference somehow here. This human body started to shake a lot, sometimes very violently. And this was a new experience as an observer of what the human body can do. I hadn't seen this ever in all of the records of my life. And sometimes after this shaking, I would get immense feelings and experiences of these feelings. And last week, in a 1-hour meditation, for 30 minutes I shook violently. Just unbelievable levels of shaking, high energy in this body. And afterwards I was left with this feeling, experience of just total grief. And there was no image, there was no person, child, event, rescue dog. None of this was in image. It was just grief coming out and through. And so my mind took hold of this and said, well, it must be about this child. It must be about this. It must be about my friend who was murdered. And the mind tried to make this grief about the mind character. And so, because my mind grabbed it, I communicated this experience of grief badly. And it generated in many of you pity. But pity for who? Pity for a mental character? And the reality is that I know if we live from there, that this is the reason why. It's not that you won't have pity for people who have lost somebody, but somebody who is experiencing grief now for an event long ago. It's very important to investigate that, I feel, and see that the reason they are feeling it still is because of having a mental separate character that refused to let them feel it. The senses did not surrender their defenses. And so I communicated this experience badly. Because when I come back to presence, as I sit here now as presence, what happened was that this poor human body of mine was carrying a great burden that had to be released. And that burden was carried because the mind had stopped it from coming through all of those times that it needed to come through. And so it came through in one wave of an experience of grief, leaving the energy body and being felt in the conscious mind and in the conscious physical body. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Because it shows that when you return to presence and that unconditional love, it will clean your body. It will heal your body. It will release these things. The character cannot heal itself. The character is the reason you're sick to begin with. The character is the reason that the world is as it is to begin with. And when you see this difference between the mind and its interjection of the natural ways, you will see God's love so clearly. Because when the mind is quiet and you are living in presence, you feel grief, you allow it. You feel sorrow, you allow. You feel joy, you allow. You need to rest, you rest. You need to eat, you eat. You need to stop eating, you stop eating. It's there. It can be felt. But the mind will as we all know, the mind will lead you away from that. The mind will lead you to the suffering. It will tell you, just eat some more. Let's get something. Or, don't grieve now. Later. When, if not now? And so I'm learning so much from being in presence again and understanding how the human body makes these records and carries this burden in the world with it. And it just goes to show you the way the world is really integrated into heal the self, heal the world. You can't believe how true that is. So this experience of grief releasing from me, it's over. Will more release through this body? Will it shake free in these high energy times of meditation where the energy is reverberating out? I don't know. But when it does, I'll be sure to come to you as presence and say as presence, from this state of presence, without mind, without attachment, without it being about a sorrow full of character. This human body is letting go of grief right now. Because in the past, when it should have felt it, the mind stopped it. And so it's got stored trauma and burdens that now must be let go. God bless, guys.